Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for the invitation. My name is Dr. John Seago. I serve as the president of Texas Right to Life, and I've worked with Right to Life for, I volunteered for them 18 years ago, and have worked with them for 14 years, and my job for 14 years was to lead our legislative efforts in the Capitol. And working with our legislative team, and we have a full-time lobby team that works there every day of the session with our elected officials, with their staff. Earlier last year, our board of directors asked me to serve as president. So a little bit bigger scope, but still my passion is for legislation, and that's what they asked me to fill you in on where we are legislatively. We have a huge year last 2 years for the pro-life movement. We started off 2 years ago with the legislature passing the Texas Heartbeat Act that prohibited abortions from around 6 weeks and later. And that reduced the number of abortions in Texas by 55%. And then we saw last summer, the Supreme Court finally overturned the error of Roe v. Wade and allowed states and their representatives to determine what their policy is going to be on elective abortion. So now today we get to celebrate the fact that every human life in Texas, in the womb, all preborn children in Texas are recognized by Texas law and are protected from elective abortion. This is something huge to celebrate, and we finally have gotten that. You know that for decades, our movement, our state, has been in the shadow of Roe v. Wade, and that has shaped what we've been able to accomplish, what we've been able to focus on, and finally we have the freedom to look at these new challenges. And a lot of my friends, they said, okay, well, does that mean you get to retire? Are you done with the pro-life movement? And obviously not. We have a lot of work to do, but the analogy that I like to give them is from a biblical story. And whenever I have 2 children, and whenever we were expecting our first child, his name is Nahum. Whenever we were expecting our first child, people would give us these children's versions Bibles, these children's Bibles. And it wasn't like the ESV or the King James Version. It was like they rewrote the stories to make them more kid appropriate. And I would always go through those, and most of those kids' versions Bibles ended up in my trash can, because they weren't the Bible. They weren't actually what happened in Scripture. And one of the stories that I would always go to for my test to see if this kid's Bible was actually telling us the truth, I would go to the story of David and Goliath. Okay? And these kids' versions, they always change the biblical story. So you all know that Noah and the Great Flood is not just an animal-themed cruise, right? It's not all happy it is about the holiness of God and the sinfulness of man, right? It is a lot heavier than just little fun animals going up onto a boat. But that's what the children's version of the Bible will tell you. Well, the other story that always gets cleaned up for the kids' version would be David and Goliath. And so David and Goliath is the story I want to point you to think about where we are as the pro-life movement. And if you remember, the David and Goliath story is that you had the Israelites and their army, and you had the Philistines and their army. And they were at an impasse. And the Philistines sent out one of their war heroes, who was a giant soldier named Goliath. And he went out and he said, we don't need to fight, all of our armies fight. We want one-to-one combat. Send out your best warrior, and I will fight him. If I lose, then the Israelites win, and we'll leave. And then if Israelites' hero wins, then we'll be defeated, right? Other way around also. If we win, you have to leave. And so nobody would do it. Everybody was scared. They were frozen, okay? David comes along, little shepherd boy. He's got, barely any meat on his bones. He comes up. You know the story. He volunteers to go. He gets up his sling. The stone goes to the head of Goliath, and Goliath hits the ground. Okay? Well, what the kids' versions of that story don't tell you is what happens next. After Goliath hits the ground, who can tell me what happens after Goliath hit the ground? Exactly. They didn't go back to tell the king. They didn't have a feast, right? It was a huge moment. Goliath, nobody thought that was going to happen, right? So it is a huge moment to recognize. Goliath just fell. That's huge, right? But it's not done yet. David walks over there, takes out the sword, and chops off Goliath's head. Then what happens? Is it over? Is it time to party yet? What happens after Goliath was finally defeated? Anybody remember? What's that?
He carries the head back.
He carries the head back. Yeah. And then what do the Philistines do?
They run away.
They run away. And then what do the Israelites do? They chase after them. So the war was not over. For the pro-life movement, where we are right now, Goliath just hit the ground. The enemy is down, but the war is not over. And you know what has happened in the last 2 years? That we have seen the Philistine army, we have seen the pro-abortion forces retreat. They knew Roe was going to fall, and it fell. They retreat, and they're looking for a better battleground to fight on. They're looking where they can hide out, where they can get the high ground for the next battle. And now our responsibility is not to go back to the king and celebrate, not to throw a banquet, not to pat ourselves on the back or pat the back of the politicians, but to continue to march, to continue to work. And what we've seen here is from the industry, from the pro-abortion forces, is that they knew Roe was over, but they knew that wasn't the entire battle. So we're seeing the other side, the pro-abortion, Planned Parenthood, Whole Women's Health, these companies, but also new players, new soldiers coming to the field, and they are coming up with innovative ways to sell abortion. They're coming up with new strategies of how to threaten and target innocent human life. Things like convincing district attorneys, our public prosecutors who we elect to uphold law and order, the pro-abortion side has convinced them not to enforce our pro-life laws. So they've said, Planned Parenthood, I will endorse you, DA of Harris County, District Attorney of Dallas County, Travis County. We will endorse you, we'll give you money. Soros is invested in those races, as long as, even if Roe is overturned, you don't enforce pro-life laws. And a handful, about 6 of our DAs in Texas actually have said this publicly. They've signed public letters, they've had press conferences saying, even if you as a citizen bring him evidence, right, that there is a doctor breaking our pro-life laws here in Harris County, he's not going to prosecute. He's just going to look the other way. We're seeing illegal websites popping up to sell abortion-inducing drugs directly to women, to mail them directly to women, actually even to mail them directly to dorm rooms. So we're seeing that, yeah, the Planned Parenthood isn't doing abortion in their brick and mortar anymore, but these websites have popped up, and that they will they'll send you the drugs that will cause an abortion for you. And they're advertising on our college campuses. I got pictures from UT San Antonio, from our pro-life students there, have taken pictures of what's going on their campus. And in their bathrooms, there are stickers up on the wall that say, do you want to be unpregnant? And it has a QR code. And you know, QR codes, those annoying things that we have to use to get our menus at restaurants now. So you go, you put your phone up to that QR code, and it takes you to one of these illegal websites. And it's run from a physician in Europe using a pharmacy in India. So we have pro-life laws that make that illegal, but they're doing it outside of our jurisdiction. That's the creativity, the new strategies. That's what I mean when I say we're seeing them adapt. Okay, Goliath is down, but we've retreated. We've got a nice, safe place to do this battle from. And they're getting more and more creative every day. The last example that I'll give you is that there is actually right now a group that is advertising that you can pay them a lot of money. Pay them a lot of money. They will ferry you into federal waters in the Gulf of Mexico, where they have a yacht that they have turned into a floating abortion clinic, a surgical abortion. Right? There's actually, the articles came out last year explaining, interviewing women who have done this. Right? There's another group that's just raising money to do that, but there's one group that's already doing it. And we're hearing testimony from women that they're actually doing this. So that's what I mean by the enemy is not giving up. The war is not over. We're still seeing innocent human life here in Texas threatened. And that's my first point. If you got this handout, from it with our logo on it. That's what you see in that first one. And that's why the first task is the pro-life movement. Things that we're working on is to enforce our laws. All of these things that I've described to you are ways that they're trying to go around our law or ignore our law or subvert enforcement of the law. And so first and foremost, this legislative session, my team, Texas Right to Life, we're spearheading the effort that we have to enforce our laws. What good is a law if we don't enforce it, right? So we have we have very good laws on the books, but now it's a point of, do we have the tools on the table to make sure that these illegal behaviors, these lawless activities are going to be stopped? And we've been working on with those DAs. What do we do with those district attorneys? Well, we need to make sure that we can remove bad acting DAs, that we have the right process in place. And I know some activists here are very upset with the DA and have looked at that process where we have to go to a local judge to bring those charges against a DA. And is that fair? Or they're probably working in lockstep. A judge is not going to go against their DA. And so
county for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of concerns about how do we remove DAs? How do we raise a concern if we think a DA is not upholding their oath of office? I'm pragmatic, I'm practical. At the end of the day, I'm thinking about, okay, well, maybe I'm never going to force a Democrat DA to do the right thing, but how can we go around them? How can we still bring criminal charges? And so some of our representatives are working on giving the Attorney General the authority to bring criminal charges to someone in a jurisdiction where the DA is ignoring the law, and allow the Attorney General to handle that. There has been an idea of allowing neighboring DAs. So maybe you can't get the Harris County DA to do the right thing, but you could get the Montgomery County DA to do the right thing, or one of the other counties around there, for them to have jurisdiction to come in. So these are ideas of how we actually enforce our laws. On the illegal websites, we're working on making sure that if it has been reported that a website is not just talking about illegal abortions, it's not First Amendment issues. We're not just saying you can't talk about abortion. We're saying if you were actually participating in an illegal activity, then that website can be blocked if it's reported and verified to be not just promoting something illegal, but actually acting in it. Yes, ma'am.
Well, what about these young ladies? Because part of the issue is the young generation has lost a sense of morality and what life is, okay?
Yep.
So you cannot go after those women and prosecute those, okay? They are coming from a place of either fear or something else. Mm-hmm. And so how are we addressing that?
Yep.
Okay? Because we cannot prosecute them. We could prosecute the abortion providers and all those people, mm-hmm. but how do we deal with the very core of what's going on with our young people?
Right, yeah, so I'll get there. That's my last point on the building of Pro-Life Texas. But you're absolutely right, it is a difficulty, right, to enforce these issues. But on the websites, they're the ones that are selling. It's just kind of like, in a lot of areas of public policy, we focus on the one that is doing the illegal activity, and we prosecute them. And that's that's kind of how we're looking at this issue. The other one is, one thing that we found was successful in the Texas Heartbeat Act is civil liability, and that's just a fancy term for allowing citizens to sue those that are breaking the law. That each citizen has the right to enforce the law. If you have evidence that someone in Galveston is, coordinating these abortions to go out in the Gulf of Mexico, that you would have the standing to sue them directly. And that's going to be more of an incentive from these activists than worried about their DA, because their district attorney has already said he's not going to do the job. So these are ideas, these are things we're working on, legislators, is putting the right tools on the table to enforce our laws. We don't need to go, and change that abortion is illegal. We need to go change and make sure we have the right tools to actually stop these behaviors. And we're seeing that, of course, the Democrats are going to try to change our laws. They're going to try to add exceptions to our laws. They're going to try to undo our progress. Unfortunately, a handful of Republicans have come out and said that they support adding exceptions to our pro-life laws. And in our opinion, that would be repealing the right to life for some Texans. We've already acknowledged the right to life, and if we go back, we would actually be losing ground, taking that back. On the issue of sexual assault always comes up in this conversation. Us conservatives, we should be the first to want justice for any victims of sexual assault, making sure that we are holding that scumbag accountable for what he's doing to women, making sure that we really are pursuing those. But why on earth would we punish the child for the crime of his or her father? That's something that Texas Right to Life is never going to support. We believe that no matter the circumstance of your conception, no matter your family circumstance, you have a right to life because you're human and you're created in the image of God. So that's a non-negotiable for us. We lose some friends over that, but that's kind of where we are. That's where we're going to continue to be this session. And we're seeing some efforts to undo that. I think we can be successful and overcome those, but we are going to have to deal with that in the Capitol. I'll jump down to number 3 on your list there. Number 3 is we don't want just Texas to be abortion free, right? You get accused of that by your pro-abortion friends, that you just care about life in the womb, and that's not true. As pro-lifers, we want Texas to be abortion free, but we also want Texas to be pro-life. We want to stop the attacks on life, and we want to promote life and protect it. And so there's a lot we can do to build a pro-life Texas, to make Texas embrace the pro-life values and promote life. And so making sure that women have access to social services to overcome those barriers. We see that in Texas, unfortunately, some young women do get kicked out of their house if they're going to continue in a pregnancy. We want to make sure they have the counseling, the social service support to overcome these barriers, whether they're in the family, whether they're economic or social. We can do that. We can make sure that we are providing those social services. We want to make sure they have the access to medical services that they need. These are good things that we can do to promote life. One of the things that we found last year is we were talking to women on college campuses, and they were telling us that if they get pregnant, that they may have to end their educational career. They won't be able to finish their 4-year degree. And so we kind of asked, okay, what are the barriers there? Why technically is that happening? And a lot of our state schools have policies that say if you take 2 semesters off to have a child and to start raising your child, you can come back to school, but you have lost all your scholarships that the state gave you. You've lost all your benefits to on-campus housing. And so for some of our students in Texas, that's the difference between finishing their degree or not finishing their degree. And you all know it's in her best interest to finish that degree, to get that career that she was pursuing. It's going to be in the best interest of her child so that she can be economically successful and independent. And so one thing we want to do is, these are not big government solutions. We want to get the government out of the way. We want to tell that college, hey, no, let her be independent. Let her come up with how she's going to finish her degree. Don't put barriers in her way. And there's a lot of things that we can do in Texas to build a pro-life state. One of them is child support. A couple of elected officials have already filed bills to begin child support at the moment the woman finds out that she's pregnant. Her financial costs, you all know, when you find out you're pregnant, your financial costs begin immediately, whereas right now the father's financial investment it does not actually begin until birth. So there's things like that we can do, and that's where this piece fits in about education that you brought up, is we've had some bills already filed to make sure that our high schools and our colleges are teaching the basic biological facts relevant to the child, the unborn child, and making sure that in high school we're telling the truth about what is going on there. Because we can have a discussion about the ethics of abortion, whether it's the right thing to do, whether it's not the right thing to do. But the reality is, biology and science are on our side. It's an individual human being in the womb, and we need to teach that. And we actually need to require our high schools to teach that. Because how are we going to have these conversations if they don't even know the truth? They don't even know what science says about life. And so that's one area in the Build a Pro-Life Texas that we've already seen a lot of attention to. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I had another question.
Yeah.
First of all, how much are you guys working with the pro-life clinics, okay? Like CareNet and some of the others, because they are the front lines where these girls can go, and women who've had abortions, because they're broken and
Yep.
they need healing, okay? We can't just throw them to the curb because they made a wrong decision.
Yep.
Okay, so, but the thing is, are you guys working with them? And heck, we need to do some kind of protection of those pro-life clinics because of the attacks that occurred on them after that was overturned. That Jane Was Here organization, we need to make sure that we're protecting those pro-life clinics.
Yep.
And that we're getting more of them out there in the community.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So we work with the pregnancy center to make sure that they know what the law is. They have legal questions that we help with. We actually set up the Alternatives to Abortion program that if a center wants to participate, not everybody wants to,
Right.
but if a center wants to participate, that they can get reimbursed for the ministry they're already doing, for the counseling, the parenting classes, things that they're already doing, that they can get reimbursed for those services from the state. Now, some clinics don't want anything to do with the state. That's fine. I'm going to protect them from any kind of registration, from any kind of licensing or anything of that. Those ministries need to be able to do what they're called to do. And so we do have that, but we've also set up these other systems. Thankfully in DC, there has been some movement on investigations of these attacks on the pregnancy centers, because we have seen, and I live in Austin, it's an occupational hazard, sorry, it's unfortunate, but I've got to live there for work. But I live in Austin, and one of our main centers that we support was vandalized, and not a single police follow up, not a single FBI call. I mean, just imagine. And then there's a friend of mine runs a clinic up in Pennsylvania, and it was actually firebombed, and it burnt completely to the ground. And they were able to rebuild their entire clinic, open it up, start seeing women again without a single call from the police, a single call from the FBI. But just imagine if that would have happened to a Planned Parenthood. I mean, just imagine if a Planned Parenthood was firebombed. There would have been a lot more heat from law enforcement to figure out which of these crazy pro-lifers, which of these crazy right-wingers did this, right? So we're seeing the politicalization, obviously, of those investigations, unfortunately.
Has they come to your door to try to arrest you yet?
We typically, I know you're new, but we'll let the speaker do theirs, and then we have ample time. We should have plenty of time tonight to get all kinds of questions. So
Yep, we'll keep going.
To help you with your flow, right?
No, thanks. That's all right.
That's
We'll
okay.
keep going.
No, I love the dialogue. I'm sure John does too.
So there's a long list of things we can do to build a pro-life Texas. So make sure that we're proving that we really are pro-woman, we're pro-family, we're not just anti-abortion. And that's kind of where the adoption and the foster care piece fits in. We've been working with some other groups like the Texas Public Policy Foundation on how in Texas can we be the best state for adoption and foster care. We've over the last couple of years, I'm sure you've seen the headlines, I'm sure you've seen the stories and the accusations. We don't have a functioning and reliable adoption and foster care system right now. And Texas, as pro-life as we are, when we looked at the last year before the Texas Heartbeat Act took place, we saw there were 53,000 elective abortions. So in 1 year's time, 53,000 elective abortions. Well, now that abortion is illegal, the majority of that 53,000 are going to be here in our state. And those families are going to have individual needs, and some of those families aren't going to be in a place to parent. And so we have to have, now more than ever, a reliable system, a safe system for what are we doing with adoption, CPS, and foster care. So those are on it. We're not writing the bills on that. We're supporting some of our partners that's more of their area of specialty, but we definitely want to remind our Republicans, remind our friends that is part of building a pro-life Texas as well. And so these are two ways that we're reacting to this point in the battle, right? Where Goliath has hit the ground, the enemy is fleeing, trying to get a higher ground, better battlefield for them, and we have to continue. And so this legislative session is extremely important. This legislative session is the first session after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And we feel, at Texas Right to Life, we feel a very high burden that the Republicans, that the pro-lifers need to prove these are our values. These are what we're committed to. Even after something as history-changing as Roe v. Wade being overturned, this is a unique opportunity to really enforce our laws, not let these activities become the status quo, and to build a pro-life Texas. And so that's kind of on the how we deal with pregnant women, how we deal with preborn children, but you know that being pro-life is more than just that. Being pro-life is actually caring for all innocent human life that is being threatened. And in Texas, we as Texas Right to Life, we have actually led the way in applying those same principles, right? The same principles that we have in abortion and pregnant women, applying those to vulnerable patients in our Texas hospitals, applying those to medical ethics. And this is one of the new fronts for the pro-life movement that we've been working on since 1999, is that we have seen those same ethics that say that that unborn child is not worth life, that say that it's best for them to be killed in abortion. Those same anti-life ethics are being applied in our hospitals. And a lot of us saw that during COVID. A lot of us saw that in the last few years, where we look at how human life becomes a number, right? Human life becomes a score. Is this life more valuable than that one? Not this, what you and I believe about human life, that we were created by God, who created us in his image, that each human being has immense value, right? That's not what we've been seeing happening in our medical system. And I'm not anti-doctor, I'm not anti-hospital. I have a doctorate in bioethics. A lot of my friends are ICU nurses and doctors. I appreciate what they do, but when you look at how decisions are being made in our hospitals, it's not the pro-life ethics are winning the day. And so that's why on number 2 on your page, that we have it as one of our core values, our core goals this session is to protect vulnerable patients. And there's several ways that we do that, but one of the biggest ways is to fight back against something called the 10-day rule. And this is the last thing I want to mention, is the 10-day rule is this unique law that Texas has that essentially gives a physician in the ethics committee of the hospital the final authority on whether you get a ventilator, whether you get life-sustaining treatment. So if you have a loved one who is in the hospital and they're in the ICU, they're on a ventilator, and you're there making decisions for them, it could be my wife, and she's there in the ventilator and I'm making decisions for her. Texas has a unique law. No other state has a law exactly like this, where a doctor can go get permission from his ethics committee to withdraw that treatment, even if I'm there saying, keep the ventilator on. Even if my wife wrote her wishes in an advance directive, right? It's called the Texas Advance Directive Act. And it gives the patient a 10-day. So we say, we're gonna take your ventilator away in 10 days. That's why we call it the 10-day rule. And as the husband, I'm supposed to try to transfer her to another facility or to get another physician to come in. But if you've ever been in that situation with a loved one, you know that is impossible. As somebody who doesn't have admitting privileges at that hospital, I cannot transfer my wife, right? I can't, if I call up a hospital across town and say, hey, can you take my wife? They're like, why are you calling me, right? Get your doctor to call me. Well, my doctor has already decided her life is not worth living, that this ventilator shouldn't continue. So our 10-day rule is extremely dangerous. It's unprecedented. Nobody else has it. It's unethical, right? Those important life and death decisions need to be made by the patient or those closest to the patient, not a hospital committee. And it's unconstitutional. We actually had a case 3 years ago where we challenged the constitutionality of this law, and we had a court of appeals agree with us that this law is unconstitutional. And that case is still ongoing, so we don't have a final judgment there. But this is a really critical issue. So in Texas, we are working on, we're leading the effort to overturn the 10-day rule, to put more power back in the hands of patients and their surrogates. And so that's what I mean by protect vulnerable patients. And it's the same cause. It's the same reason that we opposed abortion, is because we thought every life was worthy of protection is the same issue. And so we're working on those policies as well in the legislature. We're gonna have some good progress. We've already made some good progress. The last thing before we open it up for Q&As that I wanna mention is this other handout that I passed out, this blue handout. This is an educational event that we're hosting in Austin in 2 weeks. This is the Convention for Life. And so some of you have heard of the Rally for Life, the Texas Rally for Life, where you go down to the Capitol and you march and you hear speakers on the south side of the Capitol. It's a great event. Well, around that event, to complement that, we have created an educational conference where you can come and hear great pro-life speakers, great apologists. Frank Pavona is going to be there. Trent Horn, a great apologist, is going to be there. We have a lot of our college students who run pro-life groups around the state. They come in, they bring big groups. So I want to invite you to register for this great event. If you're going to be in Austin for the March for Life, that's a really good event in a way that we can educate and then keep the momentum of talking about what is next for the pro-life movement. So that's all I have prepared to discuss, but I'm sure there are questions, comments from you guys, so definitely want to open that up. Yeah.
I just want to clarify this. The 10-day rule is you have 10 days to find a hospital that will take your loved one, and then after that, they can kill them.
Yes, so yeah, thanks for coming back to that. So after the 10 days is up, the 10-day countdown, that hospital has absolute immunity to take your treatment away. They have civil immunity. You can't sue them for malpractice, right? You can't sue them for wrongful death. They have criminal immunity. It's not homicide, even though they're causing your death, right? They're completely immune from that. And administrative immunity. They can't lose their license. They can't get disciplined by the medical board. And there's a lot of law review articles that looks at this law and says, nowhere else in Western civilization can we find that clear immunity. Doctors can do this and there's no recourse. And so yeah, at the end of the 10 days, and at Texas Right to Life, this was so bad in the late 2000s, or 2008, 2007. This got so bad that we actually had to open up a department, an office, to just help families do this. And so at Texas Right to Life, we have a patient advocacy team that gets calls from families in Texas who are facing this and saying, hey, we just got this piece of paper saying there's going to be an ethics committee meeting. And we go and our attorney goes and represents them. We help transfer them. But the law is the problem. The law is broken. We shouldn't have to rely on nonprofits like us to secure, protect your right to life as a patient. And this has been a huge issue in the last 2 decades. Yeah.
I thought we had legislation on that the last time around, and I don't remember how far it went. Where did we get stuck so that we can prevent that stuckness this time?
Yes, so the Texas Medical Association, Texas Hospital Association, unfortunately there's another pro-life group that defends the law, and then there is a lobbyist for the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops that she defends the law as well. So politically, not everyone agrees that this law is as bad as I'm saying it is. Now, they don't help the families like we do, so they don't have the first-hand experience. But these groups politically, raise it, and elected officials, whenever you've got groups like that are opposing each other, elected officials want to have nothing to do with that bill, because they know if I vote yes, these people are going to be mad at me. If I vote no, those people are going to be mad at me, and so they've walked away from it. So last session, we had the bill got out of committee from both chambers. The House bill got out of the committee, got to Calendar's committee where it was killed, and then on the Senate side, it got out of committee, and it was scheduled for a floor vote, but then it was canceled because the Republicans were worried. There were 2 Republicans that were worried about having to take a record vote on that. And so it ended up not going to the floor. So we've been working with the stakeholders. We do our best to try to understand the other side, try to get as much progress as we can. We are going to make progress on this session. It's very difficult because we have different worldviews with some of these groups, very different perspectives, but we've been working for, I guess it's 3-4 months now with these groups to make more progress than we did last time. Yeah,
I had a couple of questions.
yeah, please, go ahead.
One of the other issues that I'm seeing with people trying to circumvent the abortion law is there's a lot of corporations that will finance employees to go out of state to get abortions.
Yeah.
Is there something that the legislature can do about that, and what is y'all's position on it?
Yeah, so that's an important issue. It's not going to be a priority for us. You know, it's kind of like when you leave your kids at home. You know, if you go and run errands and you leave your kids at home with a to-do list, and you're kind of like, it would be nice, you know, if you made your bed, but first I need you to take out the garbage. We try to prioritize things for the legislature. So we say, hey, it would be nice if you did these other things, but what I'm expecting, what I want to prioritize are these lists. So this issue didn't quite make our priority list this year, but it is something that has already been filed, and they may pass something. But what we have seen is the solution to this is to go after the tax breaks that these companies get. So you know, Texas, we want companies to come here, move their headquarters here, you know, and when we do that, we offer them all these tax breaks. And so, you know, all of these incentives to get you here. And there's some legislation filed that says, you know, you can make that policy that you will pay for the travel cost or even the cost of the abortion for a woman in another state. But if you do that, if you adopt that kind of policy, you do not qualify for all of these tax breaks that we give, that Texas gives, not federal, but that Texas gives to these companies.
And I have one more question.
Yeah.
What is Texas Right to Life's position on requiring paternity tests for child support payments?
We don't have a position on that. Our goal is not to change how the current system works. As far as verification and the courts, you know, what you can do to appeal or to get the courts involved. Our point is just when you're eligible to begin the support. And right now it's at birth, and there's legislation already filed to begin at the moment that the woman confirms that she's pregnant.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So you can look at House Bill 1280 regarding penalties for businesses.
Yeah, there's another one too, but yeah, that's one. Yeah, yes, sir.
No, just
Oh.
others. Any other questions for John? Alexi?
Probably best if John didn't comment on this because he's diplomatic, but one of the groups that he was probably referring to is Texas Alliance for Life, and they are a fake pro-life group. Just want to make sure all of y'all know that, so don't trust him if you see anything by them.
Thanks for not saying that, John.
Well, I just had one more. How is it, I didn't read the pro-life Texas heartbeat bill, but in there, one of the things that I've been noticing is that we do have young men who don't want their child aborted. Is there some provision in the pro-life movement for supportive of those guys who don't want their child aborted?
Yeah, so this has been the shadow and the shape of the courts on this, is that they have completely denied any right of the father in the decision to abort or not. And actually, some of you remember back in the 90s when we had Planned Parenthood versus Casey, a huge Supreme Court decision, they said that yes, pro-life states can pass all of these, you know, common sense laws like informed consent, you know, making sure a woman receives certain information before she has an abortion, a waiting period, making sure that she has time to reflect on the decision, parental involvement if it's a minor, that you can require the parents to be involved. They kind of went through all of these policies and said, yes, states can do that. The only one they rejected was spousal notification, that a state cannot require even the husband to be notified that his wife is getting an abortion. And so from the very early days of this debate, the father's involvement has been completely blocked out of it. And even now, I mean, in Texas, as you know, Texas is a pro-life state, but New Mexico is not. You know, a lot of our abortion clinics moved over the border, moved their headquarters to right over the border, where they are now advertising for Texas women to travel to New Mexico to get an abortion. And that's completely allowed. There's nothing we can do to stop women from traveling there, other than trying to convince them it's in their best interest to receive these services that we're providing them. But there's nothing that keeps a a woman from, there's nothing that has to notify him or get his involvement. It's just one of the real, awful characteristics of this. And I'll just say this, the way that the court has framed the issue is it is a woman versus her child, that they have conflicting interests. And, we're obviously, most of us are people of faith. We understand, that really informs this. But also just common sense, that's not what is going on here. The relationship between a mother and a child is the most integral. It's the most, the kind of most complex relationship. And it's one of nurturing just by how God designed it. And so for us, the law kind of ignores all of that, that their interests are bound up in one another, and kind of acts like they're two parties, like suing one another and weighing one another. And that, unfortunately, the husband has never been in that equation in the eyes of the court.
Any other questions? Janet? You have time?
The focus has been so much on the unborn child and on the mother, and the fathers are a lot of times left out of this. And I think that there should be some kind of legislation or something that also gives the fathers and the men that are involved in these to get counseling or services or whatever that they need. A lot of times it's because of the man's decision that the woman gets the abortion and that she does not want.
Right.
And so I think we are forgetting or neglecting a group of people who need some services too. And there is in our area, the Pregnancy Center. Some of you are familiar with that. It's a nonprofit Christian outfit, and they are opening their second or third facility. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, and they have started. They're just now starting, or have started, a group for the fathers and the men that are involved with these women. And they have a separate counselor for those. And these are the kind of resources that we need.
Yeah.
I don't know what you can do in the government, but it's, let's not neglect some important people that are involved in this.
Yes, and those centers are leading on that. And if a center offers that counseling to the father of the child or a parenting class, that can be reimbursed on our program. And so the Alternatives to Abortion program, it does reimburse for the counseling for the husband or the father as well, but that requires the pregnancy centers to have the resources and the ability to focus on the fathers. And so you're absolutely right. When we talk about the issues, by the time they get onto my radar, I'm talking about the fruit of a tree that has already rotten. Right there, we're talking about abortion. If a woman is considering abortion, there's so many things that have already gone wrong, right, in her relationships, in decisions that she's made, decisions that others have made. There is such a breakdown, and the government, unfortunately, can only look at the fruit and not look at the roots, and not look at what are the causes of these issues. And so we can try to incentivize these, but at the end of the day, we all know this is an issue of good and evil. This is an issue of Satan and the devil that wants to bring death, wants to break families apart, wants to break up couples, right? And destroy lives. And so we understand there is a spiritual element to that this government is never going to touch. But we can do justice. We can make sure that we are protecting life by our laws, that we are incentivizing these ministries to reach out. There's so much we can do, but I don't want to make it sound like we can rely on Austin for everything. We all know that there is a bigger picture going on here. But we also, at the same time, we can have some optimism that the Lord has been faithful in giving us huge success in the last 2 years, saving tens of thousands of lives just here in Texas. And we want to build on that momentum. And so, yes, the battle is not over. But we had a huge moment in the battle with Goliath hitting the ground, but now our side needs to continue to pursue, needs to continue to fight. And that's what we're doing at Texas Right to Life. and we're happy to have you all partner with us.
One more.
Please.
How are the women who need and men who need the services, how's it going to be advertised? How are they going to know where to go to get the resources? Is there something in place already? Is it online? Is there advertising somewhere? I mean, how are they going to be able to find these
Right.
resources?
Yeah, so each center, so part of the money that the centers get, they can spend that anyway. Some of the centers buy a mobile unit, some of the centers expand, open up another brick and mortar, and some of the centers use that money for advertising campaigns. One of the big groups that receives the contract from the government focuses on online advertising. So if a woman goes and opens up Google and searches for abortion, Cypress, Texas, she's gonna see a Google ad that says, "Are you pregnant? We can help." And so that will lead to the calling center that will then set up an appointment for her to physically go into the center closest to her. And so that is Human Coalition is the group that gets that contract that works on that piece, because that's billboards are great, but the online advertising when a woman is actually sitting down trying to look at her options, that's the most effective piece that we've been targeting.
One more, John?
Yep.
Anyone? She said 2 at bats already. All right, Alexa, you again.
Okay, so I'm confused, is there any part of those abortion drugs being mailed in from overseas that's illegal? The women taking them, or them coming into our state, is there any part that's illegal?
Yes.
And is there any legislation plan to tighten that up?
Yes, so administering, mailing, handing over abortion-inducing drugs is illegal in Texas.
But they're out of country. I mean,
Right, so another trend I didn't talk about is we are seeing some of those same abortion-inducing drugs physically being brought over the border and distributed in South Texas. There's actually, this is not just conspiracy theory, Vice News, extreme left, very radical report. They actually did a whole video segment interviewing women that are doing this, that are bringing the drugs over. So it's not us conspiracy theory. Vice News kind of exposed it themselves. And so we are seeing that physical bringing, and then we're seeing the mailing. The difficulty with the mailing is that is a doctor in the Netherlands who is calling in a prescription to a pharmacy in India that is then mailing the abortion-inducing drugs directly to women. Now, how do they even find out about that? The website, the illegal website. Now, it's hosted in another country, but our providers, our internet providers and our internet hosts here in Texas, they are held accountable to block illegal websites once it's been reported and verified by the authorities that this website is not just talking about something that's illegal, right, but actually participating in it. So if you find a website that explains how you can murder your husband, right, that website is protected under the First Amendment, right? Okay, so they can talk all they want, but if you find a website that is like, give us money, we will go murder your husband, then, right, that's a step further, okay? I know, nobody here has ever Googled that before, but, so there's a difference between speech and illegal activity. And once the illegal activity is reported, that's what we're looking at, that piece, is holding the internet providers and hosts accountable to blocking access for Texans to these sites that are actually participating in an illegal activity, okay? But these are difficult issues, right? I mean, we all care about the First Amendment. We don't want to see government start censoring speech, right? Because one day this could be considered illegal activity, us talking about our values, talking about freedom, right? Talking about the things that we care about. So we want to be very careful about the First Amendment. We take that seriously, but also how do we shut down these illegal, and other public policy, some of my friends working in other public policy areas with child pornography or human trafficking or illegal drugs of fentanyl distribution. Those are the same public policy difficulties of how do we stop the illegal activity with, and have a really good solution to those. So these are new areas, right? The battle, we're in a new chapter, right? As a pro-life activist, I've never had to worry about shutting the website down. That has never been on my radar. But our lobby team, our policy team is looking at how can we effectively stop these new trends targeting an innocent human life. So TexasRightToLife.com is the best place to get information. We're on Facebook and Twitter, just like you are. For the next 140 days, till the end of May, we'll be in Austin working on pro-life legislation. We have 2 lobby days where a lot of pro-lifers from around the state are coming. You can find that information on our website. 2 lobby days, and then we have our big Convention for Life education event I wanted to highlight. So thank you all for the invitation. I'll stick around if you have questions or suggestions. Really appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
Do our answer comments first? Do you have other announcements?
I don't have any more.
So for those that are new or familiar with this, we'll do our 2-minute rants, right? And you're welcome to rant too, right?
I've ranted enough.
All right. You can ask another question, whatever. So I'll do the timing or whatever, and I've got a couple announcements I'll make, but I'd rather give you guys the mic for those that want to speak your piece on whatever the issue you want to chat about. Normally not shy in here. All right, I'll give a bit of an update on, I've got to time myself. Did I go long? Election integrity. So we had a ballot security meeting last night, Harris County Public Party. Yeah.